All right, welcome back to another episode of Dynasty Market Watch. I'm Matt Davis. I'm joined by Brian O'Leary and Todd Halverson. This week we got a lot of trades to discuss, including one that Todd and I just made about a half hour ago.
Big news.
Some major shifts in the Dynasty landscape this week, and we are going to do a segment on contending versus rebuilding, and week 4 being a good inflection point for choosing one path to go down. So, Brian, you want to kick us off with Bull and Bear?
Yeah, thanks, Matt. Yeah, super excited for this episode. Happy everyone's joining us. As always, we want to kick it off with a bull or bear. So I want to just jump right into it. Michael Wilson is my buy of the week. He is being taken in rookie drafts in like late 3, early 4, a lot of what I saw. Todd, what are you thinking about the market right now?
Yeah, so if you look at KTC for Michael Wilson, he still hasn't even crossed into the late second from the rookie draft. So the guys that he was going around right now on KTC for rookies is Jonathan Mingo and Michael Mayer on either side. You've got Jalen Hyatt right there. So he's the only one of that group that's even done anything, and he's actually done something.
Yeah, I mean, that's the group that you listed are about as unsexy as possible at this moment.
You don't like Michael Mayer?
Michael Mayer. So I'm taking him. He's rookie 26, like Todd mentioned, on Keep Trade Cut right now. I think he's probably valued a little bit higher than maybe like in most of your leagues. The hype is starting to come around, but I still think you can get early on him and have him be a nice little either toss in, or I'll definitely would pay a 3. Just as like a couple of guys you mentioned, like Mingo, Bigsby, Kendry Miller, Rice, Hyatt. I'm taking him. I didn't even mention Mayer because he's lower on for me, but I'm taking him above all those guys.
You're taking him above Rashee Rice?
Yeah, for sure. I'm pretty excited about Michael Wilson right now. What I think is cool about him versus Rashee Rice getting a little more hype and earlier hype, maybe because it's Chiefs, maybe the touchdown week 1. But what I think is cool about potentially acquiring Wilson is you could have him just be like a tack on. And, like an example, like if Addison and Flowers, if they're being traded for each other, say they're similarly ranked. If I can get Wilson for either of those, like get tacked on Michael Wilson, I'm taking the side that has Michael Wilson 10 out of 10 times. What are you guys thinking?
I'm taking Rice over him, but
okay.
I'm taking Wilson over pretty much every other piece that you mentioned. Overall, I agree with you a lot. It's just Rice is a guy I've had my eye on all season. Rice and Wilson are very similar in the sense that they were not well regarded as prospects. I did not see a lot of people on their bandwagon. They were both day 2 picks. Michael Wilson was flat out ignored. People did not like that guy as a prospect.
Right.
So that's why his price is still so affordable right now. So now,
Todd, what do you think?
Yeah, with Michael Wilson, I think you kind of you alluded to it, but I think you kind of have to just add him on to a trade. I don't think that you're going to be able to slide in someone's DMs and be like, hey, let me kick you this 3rd for the guy that you drafted in the 3rd, and he's already done something. So, and also you're kind of showing your hand when you do that. Whereas if you like, all right, let's do, for example, like a bigger trade, like maybe one we're going to talk about later with Amon-Ra St. Brown. But like if you were talking of trade that was around 2 bigger pieces, and then you start negotiating, but all in the back of your mind, you're thinking, once we start going back and forth here, I'm going to slide Michael Wilson into this trade. So that's probably what I'd be trying to do with him. He's not a guy that I was really into coming in, but the film people loved him. His analytics were trash, but the film people really liked him, and he's looked pretty decent early on. So, he's somebody that I would at least be keeping my eye on, that if you're working a trade, maybe get him to throw in.
I'd agree with that. So the guy that I'm doing this week for Bull or Bear is Wan'Dale Robinson. He's a guy that I liked a lot as a prospect last year. I didn't see a ton of him at Kentucky, but as a casual college football fan that Will Levis team, I did catch them a few times, and he just looks electric, just a playmaker. And last year he was flashing a little bit, broke out, had the 100-yard game in the game he tore his ACL, coming back this year, the last 2 weeks, he's already earning targets. Offense is a disaster. So he's wide receiver 62 on KTC right now. The one guy in his range that I popped out at me is Sky Moore. I think on like name value alone right now, Sky has just enough left. You can kind of move Sky for him, I think. Some other names I was looking at, Zach Moss, Josh Palmer. Guys right below him are like Brandon Cooks, DJ Chark, Thielen. I'm totally fine adding a third to one of those older guys for him. So Wandale is what I'm trying to buy right now.
Matt, are you sending on a contender? Are you sending Thielen, who obviously is older and people have kind of written him off for the majority of his career? Are you sending Thielen for Wandale on a contender?
Absolutely. If I'm a contender, it's not because of Adam Thielen.
Let's send it one more. So on Fantasy Calc, Michael Thomas is wide receiver 59. Wandale is wide receiver 60. Michael Thomas, Wandale.
Yeah, I'm taking Wandale.
All right, so let me ask you a follow-up because I figured you would take Wandale. So let's assume that you're a rebuild. You have Michael Thomas. Wandale Robinson is an option. If you have Michael Thomas, is that your first option to go sell him for Wandale, or would you rather try to do something else? And if you were going to do something else, what might you be looking into doing?
I mean, I'm probably looking at, Michael Wilson, like Brian just said. I'm probably looking at Rashee Rice, another rookie that's not exploding in value. I'm definitely talking to the Marvin Mims owner. I'm probably looking at a tight end I think is undervalued, like Luke Musgrave. That's a rookie. But Wandale is kind of cheaper than all the guys that I just mentioned, right? So if I'm striking out right there, that's the tier I'm going down.
So it's more the discount shopping.
Yeah, you're probably going to strike out with all those guys, to be honest. But you might find somebody that's like Michael Thomas and something to get Marvin Mims, which is pretty desirable. I think we're all kind of on the Marvin Mims bandwagon. But I think most likely you're going to have to settle for a Wandale with a Michael Thomas, unless you maybe try to sell him for like a 2 is in a best case scenario. But I don't know if that's happening very often.
Yeah, maybe you have another contending piece that is scoring just enough points where the 2-for-1 will get you Mims or something. But yeah, I'd agree. You're gonna have to add something to Michael Thomas, but that's a guy that I like just below kind of the other young guys that cost like a second or more.
All right, so we talked about Michael Thomas, Adam Thielen. Let's go a little bit younger here and think about that group of guys that are in like that Amari Cooper, Ridley range. So I want to take a step back and think about, all right, we're through 4 weeks now. And something that I like to look at is not just the target share, but also the air yard share for wide receivers. And there's a stat when you kind of combine them together. It's called Whopper, weighted opportunity rating. And it's a stat that I really like because it kind of fleshes out some of the offenses where they might check down a bunch to running backs or something, and that could impact the target share. So when you implement the air yard share too, I really like just using that opposed to just the target share.
And if you see that acronym on Twitter, it's WOPR, right?
Yeah, Whopper. So I've been looking at a couple guys that maybe look at as underperforming fantasy points wise, but are performing pretty well from a Whopper standpoint. And a couple guys that jump out, Amari Cooper for one. I would just outright call him a buy. So I'm not even really going to go into that one. The one I want to talk about though is Calvin Ridley. And I even tweeted it the other day. Calvin Ridley, the last 3 games, has a target share of like 15%, and Kirk has a 28%.
Yeah.
So that's a little concerning, but his air yard share is really high. So I'm curious. I'm not necessarily saying Ridley's a buy. He might be. But what I am saying is that he's a guy that we should be kind of thinking about because he has lost some value due to what I just said, is that 15% target share versus the 28. So kind of curious on your guys' thoughts on Ridley. I'm not saying he's a buy, but his value is interesting to me.
Yeah, Todd, I think that's a great question to ask. And Ridley's super interesting because week 1, hindsight, 2020, I would have loved to have traded him after that week 1 performance. Everyone was, through the roof. But perception is definitely shifting quickly on him and what the Jaguars' offense is and what Christian Kirk is. So, I mean, It's an interesting question to ask. I think you're opening my eyes to a potential buy opportunity with Ridley. I think it's something that we've talked in previous episodes about, like kind of feeling your league out, feel the Ridley owner out, and see what is he high, is he low, is he going to kind of like work through this struggle, or or if he's panicking. Obviously, like if I could buy Ridley for 2 2s, I'm doing that. But if it's a 1, I'd be skeptical at the moment.
Yeah, and if you're looking at it, if you may have somebody that's looking at target share, and that's going to get concerning to them. Like they're looking at his targets, like, oh, I need to get out of this. But if you're kind of pulling the air yard share, and then he needs to improve his targets. There's no debating that. But
yeah.
If he can do that a little bit, I think there's an opportunity. So Matt, I saw a trade go down today. Keenan Allen for Calvin Ridley. It was actually 2 contenders. Okay. One is an absolute juggernaut. The other one is a really good contender. Yeah. And basically the really good contender got a little bit younger, and the juggernaut pushed it in with Keenan Allen further. So how would you feel about that Keenan Allen Ridley swap, basically losing a few years?
I think it makes sense if you're the team juggernaut. I think I would prefer Calvin Ridley on any contender. I like that you mentioned that you just saw that deal go down, because as you were kind of talking through his buy case, I have not really seen any panic trades for Jaguars players, Trevor Etienne or Ridley, in the last couple of weeks. I don't think anyone's really lowering their Ridley price from a couple of weeks ago. Maybe after post week 1 when it was like went nuts, but like just my perception of it is the Ridley owners aren't really tilting at all. They're not panicking whatsoever. They just kind of realize it's a function of variance and defensive matchups. But I think I like Ridley there. Go ahead.
I think it's an important distinction, the difference between panicking and perception, like panic trading and perception. Like the perception might be shifting, and that's why you want to kind of like read the between the lines sometimes. That the panic trade might not have happened yet, but it might be in a couple of weeks if this continues. Like Todd mentioned, target share, and if they're not looking into that air yard type of deal.
Yeah, even after week 1, kind of to Matt's point, he only got up to wide receiver 16 on KTC. I do think that after week 1, I was starting to be like, is he in that like Adams, Diggs, Cup range? And the last 3 weeks, it's really been like, no, he's not. He's really not in that range. But I still view him as a guy that you're going to get 3-4 really good years out of. It may not be dynamite wide receiver 1, but high-end wide receiver 2 with maybe a pop of a wide receiver 1. Kind of going back to the beginning, I don't know that he's necessarily a buy, but I do think it's an interesting thing to just kind of seek out your league mate that has Ridley. One other trade that I just kind of want y'all to think through. We've talked about Rashee Rice. Matt, you're pretty high on Rashee Rice, it sounds like. So, like, let's say we did Rashee Rice in a mid-second or Ridley.
Yeah, I'm taking Ridley. I saw that the other guy that you had down there was like Treylon Burks. So like Burks and Rashee Rice, I'm definitely adding a second to them to get Calvin Ridley. It goes back to what Brian said before. Rice is a guy that I like, but he is a late second right now in value. And if I'm paying anything less than a 1 for Calvin Ridley right now, I'm buying at that price. So if I'm functionally paying 2 2s for Ridley, any young wide receiver I value as a 2, I'm willing to add a 2 to Ridley. I just think I'm pretty confident he's going to bounce back and have some huge games.
I mentioned Cup. Brian, I'm going to kick it back to you here as we kind of look at our final segment of Bull or Bear, and we discuss a little bit about Cooper Cup.
Yeah, so this is something we've talked a little bit off air about as a group, and I think we have a consensus here after this poll we ran of Cooper Cup versus Blind 24-1 on Twitter. And yes, we got some responses that said, context or, contender rebuild or, where the 1 is, whatever the case is. When I'm thinking Blind 24-1, we're not sure if it's the 5th or if it's the 12th. It's a middling team that might be better, might be worse. No clear-cut 101 or 112. The poll results after about 350 votes, 56 in favor of the blind one over Cooper Kupp. So, I mean, Cooper Kupp to me is going to play this season in probably short order, and he's going to, if not command what he commanded last year, certainly close to that. So it's kind of, I'm confused why people are so low on Cooper Kupp. If they've forgotten what he's done the last couple seasons, is it a Puka thing? So Todd, what do you think?
So this is a really interesting one. You're using the poll. Yeah. If we look at KTC, so KTC, he's wide receiver 21. Your poll, which is kind of insinuating like a late first, maybe type value. That's kind of what I view as like a wide receiver 21 on KTC. Yeah. Your poll says it's 50-50. If we go to fantasy calc, which is basically just a collection of what their actual trade and real league value is, he's wide receiver 13. So this is a perfect example of value to the actual owner that has him and value maybe to all 12 league mates. It's going to be very different. So I don't think that our poll, not to take anything away from the discussion here, but I don't think the poll, I don't think KTC is a reflection of his actual value to the person that owns him. I don't think, Matt, you're trading Cooper Kupp for a random 21. And I think you're probably going to smash it if you got the offer on the other side.
Yeah, everybody's losing their minds. None of this makes any sense. Cooper Kupp is an absolute elite. Like, Cooper Kupp is as valuable as Tyreek Hill if he's healthy, and he's healthy now. It just doesn't make any sense. So, yeah, if you can go buy Cooper Kupp for a mid to late one, do that. I am
you're beside yourself right now.
Yeah, it just doesn't make any sense. And part of my disbelief also, we're in a Twitter group chat, and there's a couple guys that I'm not going to mention that we're just saying the most outrageous stuff about Cooper Kupp this morning. I think he's dead. He's a wide receiver 2, mid wide receiver 2 from now on. Like, I was reading that after I got off work, and I was like, I'm losing my mind over here. Like, Cooper Kupp is going to go right back to scoring 18 points a game. And he's
so I don't think you could talk about Cooper Kupp at this point without also talking about Puka Nacua. So just really quickly talk about Puka Nacua.
Do we want to talk about that? Do we want to talk about that ridiculous trade it was Cooper Kupp and a 25 first for Puka Nacua, and people were saying, "Man, that's a great Puka buy price." No, it's not. That's a terrible Puka buy price. I get if you want to take the Puka side. I understand it. I think he's legit. I said on our first episode, I think Puka's legit. But if you're a contender and you can trade Puka for Cooper Kupp in a 25 first, I'm doing that every single time. You're gaining in points until the pick comes to fruition.
Listen, Matt. I agree with you that it's saying basically they're buying Puka at what his ceiling almost is. We just talked about how difficult it is to break into that top 10-ish wide receiver ranks. That's 6, 7, 8 guys probably worth 2 1s, and if he's valuing Cooper Kupp at a 1, you're paying top 7 wide receiver, top 8 wide receiver. Todd,
yeah, buying Puka at this point. Now I get the last 2 or 3 weeks. That was great. That was awesome. All right, buying him at this point with Kupp on the horizon would be like, I mean, the iPhone 15 just came out. It'd be like buying the iPhone 14 a week before the iPhone 15 comes out, when if you would just wait until the 15 comes out, either you're going to get a price drop or you're going to get a promotion. One or the other. Just have some patience, wait for Kupp to be announced in, and then trickle into the Puka owner, and you may not get a buy low. That's not what I'm saying, but you will get a promotional price where he's actually for sale. I've gone to several Puka owners, and they're saying, no, I'm not moving him. Now, Kupp's coming back. It's announced. We're a day or two before Sunday, and then bam, you might actually be able to buy him for a reasonable price at maybe his market value instead of paying Kupp in a 25 first. My goodness, guys, what are we doing?
I'm going to buy Kupp as soon as we stop recording.
It's as simple as that. I'm sending out Kupp offers tomorrow on any contender I got. I think we've hit quite a bit of points here. I think we want to transition over to our next topic.
Yeah. This is gonna be a fun one. I'm excited about this one.
Yeah, it's a new one, so we want your feedback too. So please let us know what you think about this. It's called Diamond in the Rough. So we're thinking, everybody knows those top 10 guys, or like we were just talking about, that it's hard to crack into that grouping. So it's a small list that you're talking probably right now of people that maybe can crack into that top 10. What I think could be valuable is you find that guy that is, even if he's 12, 13, 14, in terms of value right now.
And you're talking at your position. Yeah, at your position.
At your position. Yeah. So like if he's wide receiver 14, is that a guy that could easily pop into that top 10 with, what you're seeing or projection, whether maybe it's a huge Nico Collins guy or, that type of thing. So we're looking for people that it's not like a Hail Mary for them to get into the top 10, but it's guys that are outside right now, perception wise, that we could see growing. Right.
Yeah. And so when I thought about this segment, I was looking at kind of the guys that are in that wide receiver 11 to 15 range. It's really easy to be like, oh, they're going to be the top 10. But those guys, I really want to see if they can pop into like the top 5. And if I could see them jumping into the top 5, that feels like a guy that I'd be really interested in. So I'll kick it off, and I'm going to use that example because right now Brandon Ayuk is about like wide receiver 12. It's super simple to say, okay, he's going to be in the top 10. I'm not like breaking any barriers here. But if we take a step further, and I really think that he is clearly like one of the best, most talented wide receivers in the NFL, I think that he can jump into that top 5. So he'd be my guy that I'd kick this off as a kind of a diamond in the rough. He's not really a diamond in the rough, but a diamond that could just continue to soar to the top.
Yeah, well, that makes a lot of sense. So I'm looking at an entire kind of team here with the Arizona Cardinals. I think you can get a lot of value right now out of the Arizona Cardinals offense. It's performing like a top 50% offense in the NFL, like a top 15 offense. Josh Dobbs, the last 3 games, he's averaging 23 points per game. Fantasy. Hollywood Brown, he's wide receiver 17 on the season. He's increased his receiving yards all 4 games in a row. James Conner has been solid every single week. So
just to stay on point here, Matt, are you thinking any of those guys can hop into, even if it's just like in a redraft setting?
I think
somebody that can be a top 10 guy.
I mean, top 10 is honestly kind of arbitrary to me. I think Hollywood can jump into that like low end wide receiver 1 territory.
All it takes is a Caleb Williams draft day selection, and Marquise Brown is going to soar.
I mean, that's
going to be wherever he goes.
Right now, people are not expecting production from the Arizona Cardinals, and they are delivering production. And I think that's a market that I'm trying to capitalize on right now. And then the one other guy that stood out to me, if we're talking about like dynasty value versus current day production, Mike Evans, like he always is he's a top 10 wide receiver right now. Him and Baker look like he has a good connection. KTC, I'm always wary of using KTC as a guy, but he's wide receiver 36. He's generally a guy that you can probably get for a couple seconds. So Mike Evans is another guy I'm looking at in that range.
And Matt, I don't want to change the subject too much, but
yeah,
in this same setting, someone that is, in my opinion, someone that is in the top 10 right now of their position that is a sell is something that we want to monitor as well. So for me, Kyren Williams, this is an obvious one. Probably a lot of people are thinking it, but I have seen a whole lot of deals in the last 2 weeks for him going for what I think is an early 2 rookie pick. I've asked a couple people just for my own general knowledge. I didn't want to acquire him, but what he was worth to them, a couple of people were saying a 1. So if you can find someone crazy enough to ignore the warning signs of Kyren Williams, sell for an early 2 or a late 1 that maybe you never know. Late 1 it could turn into a mid 1, right? Todd, are you in on Kyren Williams?
I actually traded Kyren Williams the week before he became the starter. And it sounded a lot better when I made the trade, and that still doesn't sound bad to me now. But I traded away Kyren Williams, Tank Dell, a very early second, the likely 201. It's a Tank for Caleb second, and then maybe another piece. But I acquired Jalen Waddle, so I got like the horse. So I still feel good about it. Since then, Tank Dell's got more valuable. Kyron Williams has been really good. So the group chat didn't like it when I made that trade. It's probably a little more fair now to everybody. And I think the person that made the deal is feeling pretty good about it. But yeah, I mean, Kyron Williams is a guy that I'd be probably looking to move. So if we're talking about running backs, I've got two that I see as possible guys that could jump into that Dynasty top 10 running back range. One of them is a real guy in the rough, and that's Tyjae Spears. Okay. So I think he's a 3-down back. Right now, his rushing grade is 10th in the NFL on PFF. He's second overall in the entire NFL for running backs in pass block grade, which at least tells me, okay, he's good enough pass blocking. Good, he's a very good pass blocker. He can stay on the field for third down. So that's one guy that I'm thinking about. If he was given the opportunity, 110 left, maybe able to jump in the top 10. And the other one, this is a little bit of a weird one, but Isaiah Pacheco. I think that the Chiefs, he's going to be there for at least 3 more years. He keeps slowly getting more work.
Yeah.
He's under contract through 2025. The Chiefs have proven now, like, they know not to draft a running back in the first round. I think they might just let him take the run with it. I don't know if he can stay healthy, but he's fun to have on your fantasy team because he runs wild.
He runs angry, man. That's what I was gonna say. Like, I don't know if it was I don't watch as many Chiefs games as maybe you guys, but that was the one thing I took from it. I know he's from New Jersey and played at Rutgers, but he was running angry the other night. That was I love watching those types of running backs.
He's weirdly an integral part of their offense. When
he really is,
I'm like they depend on him. Like Todd mentioned, he's getting a few more targets every week. His usage is different from last year, and he's a guy that I didn't really trust. I didn't really want to invest in going into the season, so I ended up with no shares of him. The draft capital is always a concern. They have kind of a committee there. Jarek McKinnon played really well down the stretch, scoring like 8 touchdowns in his last 8 games, stuff like that. So Pacheco was a guy I was concerned about, and I agree. I love that shout out. I think he's showing the 3-down usage a little bit. It's not like he's getting 80% of the snaps, but he's the clear lead back in that high-powered offense.
And there's one more running back that I want to touch on, and this is again okay, good. It's a hot name right now, DeAndre Swift. Obviously, he's got a whole bunch of truthers. Everybody knows that. He's had a ton of hype around him that's led to mostly disappointment. He's had a great start to the season. We'll call it that, minus week 1. Once Gainwell was out, he got that, once he got the call. I think he's a guy that you can buy if you're a believer in Swift, in his talent from when he was in Detroit. Now's the time to buy. It's only going to keep going up with that offense. With it seems like a confidence. What Matt? What are we thinking on Swift here?
Well, you probably have to pay a first now, right?
Yeah.
So
I'm cool with paying a first if I'm on a contender. I have a couple contenders where I have him that I'm holding unless someone's giving me like almost 2 1s. That's the only way I'm selling them, kind of thing. I'm in.
Okay, let me just ask you about the guy that I wanted to bring up because I think it's a guy that you really like. Are you taking DeAndre Swift or Tony Pollard right now?
I'm taking Tony Pollard, but it's a lot closer than I thought. If you had asked me before the season, it would have obviously been in the same stratosphere.
Yeah, and Pollard, I did just kind of want to real quick highlight in this segment. He is underperforming in all the kind of key metrics. Like the high value touches he's getting, I think, are number 1. I think he is like similar to that weighted opportunity metric that Todd was mentioning for receivers. They have a metric similar to that for running backs. I don't exactly know what it is, but essentially he's getting all the goal line carries. He's getting all the targets. He's getting a lot of work. The points are going to start coming in bunches. So Pollard is a guy I'm also trying to buy right now. I think it's probably a similar price point to Swift. I think you probably have to pay a little more for Pollard, but yeah, same thing. I'm spending a mid to late 1. I'm adding a 2 to Brian Robinson or a couple 2s or something like that if I can.
I'm going to push back a little bit on Swift. Not that I don't think he's really good, but if we're thinking about who can get into that dynasty top 10 running back range, and my concern with him is that he lost so much from the Swifties, the Swift faithful, that there's not a lot of excitement about him anymore. And I think the only way that he could really ramp into that top 10 running back range for dynasty, not just points, but it's going to take points. I think he's going to have to finish as like a top 5 or 6 running back, which he could. He's last 3 weeks. This is half PPR, but in half PPR last 3 weeks, he's running back 6. So like he could do that.
It's not going to take until the end of the season. If he has 2 more awesome games, he will be valued as a top 10 dynasty running back. That's how quickly our market moves.
Well, it's a couple of things. It's the name notoriety that he's had previously. Yes, some of the luster wore off for a while. He's on the Eagles offense, which people are drooling over. So I think it's in theory they're going to have a lot of running game scripts too. So he's going to get touches if you believe in him. But Todd, I think to your point, I think it's interesting, and I think I'm somewhere in the middle of you two. I think it's going to be more than 2 weeks. It's going to have to be more of a show me. It's not going to necessarily have to be the 2 years of Tony Pollard producing to really finally get respect, even when Zeke was washed. This is going to be more of a. I think it'll be like maybe week 9 or 10 is if he's gotten pretty consistent production there. I think people are going to be going crazy for him before their stretch playoff runs before the trade deadline.
A couple more guys of this grouping that can jump into the top 10. I think this is kind of a fun segment, and so I'm going to keep running with it. And Nico Collins, you already talked about him, but Nico Collins is a guy that we are all 3 really excited about. Me and Matt have been banging the drum, I think, for every podcast so far. And much. Brian has slowly, I think he's been on board, but now he's like in because I saw him make a few trades for him. But Nico is a guy, with him being tied to Stroud, that if he has a few more good games, Matt, you just mentioned how quick things move. He could be in the top 10 by like week 8 if he had a few games more like he's had. Now he's got to like keep it up, which is probably not likely, but he's really good.
He's just a guy that I was going to say he's just a guy that the owner values him way higher than KTC or anyone else, but that's probably not true since Brian just, like you said, Brian has been able to trade for him this week.
So
I've struck out on all my Nico offers the last.
So to be fair, I had sent out a lot of offers. My shooting percentage was not good. I did get a couple trades done, but it was 2 out of 20 kind of thing.
So what did you pay for?
I mean. So one trade, I'll just spill the bag. Like I gave up Drake London, who was obviously, it's a big buzz name. I gave up Drake London for Nico Collins straight up.
Yeah.
And that again, that's kind of like speaking to Todd's point of like potential top 10. Like Drake London in a lot of my drafts. Guy. Yeah, he was enough. Yeah, I mean, Drake London was a guy that was going in like round 3, 4 a lot of times in my startups in the offseason. So like that's hovering around that range wide receiver. So I mean, I think it's an interesting, and people pretty much were making fun of me in the chat too that I traded London for that. I want to make it clear I'm not giving up on Drake London. I still think, to Todd's point, he has that ability. I just think it's a statement to Stroud, like you're mentioning, that he unlocks what Nico does best, gets downfield.
Drake London needs his CJ Stroud to join the roster.
Please, God.
So at this point with Nico, I don't think that we can like trade 2 pieces and go get Nico anymore. I don't think you can remember we were trying to do like 2-2s for Nico back a couple weeks ago. I don't think those are happening anymore. I don't even think you're getting just for a late first is probably not. So what I'm looking at this point is, are we willing to trade back from a Devontae, like Matt, are you willing to go back from like a Devontae Smith, a DK Metcalf? I mean, I don't know, like the Nico guy might not even trade DK for Nico.
I think
trading back from like Devontae, AJ Brown, or if you're a contender, or maybe you're a rebuilder and you have a contender piece like a Diggs, Adams, Tyreek. would you trade back to Nico and try to get a plus, like a couple seconds, or maybe a Nico in a first, things like that?
I think it needs to be Nico in a first. If I'm looking at moving a top 10 dynasty wide receiver, like if you want AJ Brown, I need a first on top of Nico, and I don't blame anyone for not paying that. But yeah, I am trying to do that actually. So if I have Amon-Ra St. Brown, if I have AJ Brown, if I have Chris Olave, I'm happy to trade. I've never been this huge CeeDee Lamb guy. I would trade all of those guys for Nico in a first. His PFF grade, he's top 3 or 4. Over his PFF grade is over 90, which is insanely high. Everything about Nico screams
up there with
it's completely real.
Ayuk's number 1.
Yeah. So, and we know those guys are awesome at football. So, there's almost no price that is going to be unreasonable when you say, would you do this for Nico? Yeah, I probably would do something similar for that. So yeah.
Brian, last week we talked about a trade that I had made where I sent Breece Hall and I acquired Nico in a first.
I love that trade.
I kind of jumped the gun a little bit, but I think that's where we're at now. And when we talked about that trade, Matt really liked it. Brian was opposed to it. I even said it wasn't great value. I was a tanker, was trying to kind of get out on Breece, and I wanted to lose my RB points. But how do you feel about that type of trade now after we've gotten a little bit more information?
Yeah, and just to clarify, I loved Nico as a prospect. I had a ton of him when he was cheap. Yeah, I was all in on his size profile in that sense. So I want to make sure I was never an anti-Nico guy. And I think it was more speaking specifically to your Breece for Nico in a first. I thought it was jumping the gun value wise. I think that trade could exist right now. We're talking about with a skyrocket in value. I think that you could send that trade right now and get it accepted.
I agree with you.
Yeah. So that it wasn't that it was a bad trade. And Matt has a ton of trades like this where people will be like, whoa, what the heck? And then it ages pretty well, or it might go poorly sometimes. That's just how the game is played, right? That's how if you're going to play the game on the edges, that's how it's going to happen sometimes.
Yeah. That's what happened with the trade I made a couple weeks ago where some of the pieces involved whereas I was trading away JSN and Marvin Mims, and Nico was the guy I was getting back. And a lot of people in our chat said Nico and Mims were equal. And I was like, you guys are nuts. Nico was equal to JSN by my calculation. And that got an extreme lot of pushback. And recently I put up on at Dynasty Peasant, the most recent Twitter poll I did was Nico versus JSN. It was completely 50-50 after 300 plus votes. So it just kind of seeing the way the winds are blowing, I said right away, like we said from the beginning of this podcast series, everything about the Nico breakout screamed that it was real. Matt Harmon, PFF, Stroud looking good. Everything about it looked legit. So, I think if you got in it on him the last few weeks, you should be feeling pretty good about it.
If we're not careful with our words, we're going to have to change our podcast name pretty soon to some type of Nico Collins lover. And I wouldn't hate that, but I also don't really want to rebrand this early on. So let's work on it a little bit, guys.
So I really like this segment, this Diamonds in the Rough, kind of looking at the players outside of the top 10 and who might jump into the Dynasty top 10. So I have other guys that I'm really interested in, but let's save those for another time.
I was going to say, let's
keep it rolling. And let's look at maybe a guy that's already in the top 10, Brian. And he scores in the top 10 basically his entire life, and that's Christian McCaffrey.
CMC is a god. So this segment is something we want to call just running up the score. And we're just going to kind of focus on those contenders pieces, what you're paying for them, what are you selling them for? And, I think a lot of time in the Dynasty community, we spend so much time on, age, and this guy's younger, so he's better. And, maybe sometimes that injuries factor into value. CMC was a value last year when everyone was like, hey, Carolina stinks and yada, yada, yada. So I'm about as big of a CMC guy as anyone. He's definitely my running back 2 in Dynasty. I don't care about age. He's transcendent. He can stick around. That being said, we talked about trading, I made a trade. Again, we'll talk about this, but I sent 2 1s on a contender for him. Matt, are you paying that price?
Yeah, every time. Yep,
Yeah,
every time.
no
What
brainer.
about you, Todd?
So, yeah, the answer is yes, but I want to, in typical fashion, go into a little bit deeper detail on it. So, one thing that I am always harping on with my own contender teams is that I don't want to burn my first too soon. Now, when you're buying CMC for 2 firsts, yes, you want to go ahead and do that. I'm not saying don't choke the chickens.
He's exactly who I want to burn my first for.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't want to use my first and then I have the guy get injured and then I have no first to then. But like say, I'd rather buy if I had in my perfect world, I'm already going to get the buy. And I get to buy CMC in week 12 or 13. We don't live in a perfect world.
And Todd,
hold on. So I have heard you say that before, and it is okay to have that philosophy if you are going to get the buy. I would strongly emphasize: do not overestimate your chance. Do not overestimate your chances to get the buy. And also, a lot of studies have been done that having that bye week is more important than any other factor in winning the championship. So a lot of people, in my opinion, if you're going to make a win now move, now is the time to do it. Use Christian McCaffrey, Tyreek Hill, Kelsey to help you get that buy if you don't already.
And just some context on the trade I just made for CMC, and we've talked about timing a lot on our podcast the last couple of weeks. Obviously, it's not a great time to buy a guy coming off of 4 touchdowns, massive visible game, right? Yes, I was trying earlier, but to me, CMC is one of those. Again, we talk about known commodities. We know what we're getting, and if I get bit by the injury bug and lose because of it, he's one of those guys. Like I think your point is a good one, Todd. Risking going too early, but maybe you wait too late and someone else goes and swoops in and grabs CMC.
I didn't get to my point. I didn't get to my point. So in a perfect world, I am the only one that's going to be able to buy Christian McCaffrey. I can then just wait until week 12 or 13. I've got the best team in the league. That's my perfect world. It's not a perfect world. I probably need Christian McCaffrey because he's the best player in the world. Somebody else can then go buy him if I don't buy him. So for 2 2s. Now, if the price was like, not 2 2s, 2 1s. Yeah. If the price is like 3 1s, and now I'm like, this is a little bit pricier. Like we're starting to talk about some. Then okay, but we're talking about 2 1s. Like, yeah, just sign me up. I'll go ahead and take that now.
Yeah, at 3 1s, I'm at that point I really am checking with the Bijan owner. Like, all right, how much more for this guy? But that's the interesting question. Is like, what would it take for you to sell CMC on a contender? It would take more than 3 firsts for me. Like, it would take Justin Jefferson. And maybe Bijan, I probably would trade CMC for on a contender, but I'm not even so sure of that. So the CMC is averaging 30 points a game this year. It's insane. So
I think that if you trade CMC, it's not just about like the number of firsts. Like you're going to have to get a running back like an Achane. Or like you're gonna have to get if you're also trying to contend. Now, if you're not trying to contend, if you're trying to like
that's what I'm saying. If you're contending,
why do you have CMC at this point though? If you're
right, you sold them. If you're
obviously no clue what you're doing if you've still got CMC. So, but let's say you're trying to like pseudo contend. Like I'm gonna get younger. Let's add Achane. I'm gonna send off CMC to somebody who wants to contend. How much more plus Achane do you need to sell CMC? I think that's kind of where I would be sitting.
Matt, you're higher than me, so why don't you go and then I'll go.
I would consider selling CMC on a contender for Achane and 2 firsts. And I don't think the Achane owner is doing that, but I'm not selling CMC for less. He's probably the most valuable player in fantasy football on a contender. I'm just not moving him if I have a strong contender.
He is CMC this year, knock on wood, stays healthy. He is what Travis Kelce was to win now contending teams last year, where it's like this guy is transcending position and giving you insane value where he like in the super flex league, you're better off starting him than majority of quarterbacks in the league. And
Yep.
like that's crazy to think about.
So one quick correction on that. Not the majority of quarterbacks, every single quarterback in the NFL. Yeah, you would rather start CMC than Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen in Superflex, by the way.
So we talked about Swift earlier. Same concept as I did with Achane. What plus Swift would you add to go get CMC?
I'd add a first. I don't know about you guys.
So you're viewing Swift above Achane then, right?
If I'm buying Swift,
he's doing it.
Buying, selling.
Or if I'm buying CMC, if I'm buying, I'm not selling CMC for Swift.
Got it.
Definitely not. But yeah, so I'm adding a first to Achane and I'm adding a first to Swift, and I do have Achane at least a second above Swift. But I'm adding a first to either of those guys to get CMC on a legit contender. Now, do not, if you're a 6 seed right now and 500. You're not a legit contender. If you're undefeated and you're contending for a bye week without CMC, you're a legit contender.
I think, talking legit contender, this is a great time for us to segue over to our next, valuing what a, topic of the week, content or tank. There is no try. That's kind of my thought process, right? So you don't want to be in the middle. If you follow any of the guys on Twitter, everyone tells you this, but you don't always necessarily get the specifics or like current situation of your team, and just like some things to look for. So we kind of want to go through this as basically, when are you identifying things? How, as an owner, how often are you identifying or assessing things?
So go ahead.
And I just like general angles, maybe some ideas that we do, either shifting from a middling team to a contender or dialing it back from a middling team to a tank.
Yeah. So the first thing I need to say is you really should have made this decision a few months ago.
Bingo.
It is
sure.
It's kind of to your point about avoiding the middle. You really don't want to go into the season projected middle of the pack. It does happen. Sometimes it's hard to avoid, but if you're waiting until now to make that decision, the first week or 2 or 3 of the season, you should have kind of had an idea of which way the winds are blowing. Go ahead.
Matt, let me push back a little bit. I totally agree with you, and I usually will have it dialed into one or the other in the off season, if not before. You guys know that.
Yeah.
But I have a great example about something that you have to also be able to adjust and adapt, as it is sometimes is a fluid situation. I'm in a league where there's a bunch of teams basically trying to tank.
Yeah.
And I started off 4-0. Right. So I found myself 4-0 in a team that I thought I was rebuilding. I had 2 extra 24-1s, an extra 25-1. Yeah. Like guys like Raheem Mostert, just to like hopefully sell off at some point. Obviously, he had his big week. So I'm 4-0 with a team that I was planning on tanking. Now I'm in second place. Yeah, my max points were low, but I had lots of assets, and I knew people were selling because of tanks. Yeah. So I was able to, get Ayuk, Kelsey, Andrews, CMC in a week. Okay. Yeah, I don't have any more picks until 2026, but I think those types of guys we're talking about.
Yeah.
Game changers, right. So Todd, you agreed with Matt. Is this something that you also will view fluid, or are you saying, oh man, I need to sell more guys because I was trying to tank?
We really want to be doing this before the season, but if let's say we get into a position where like your situation where you accidentally start winning, you kind of have to just make a decision. And that's the biggest thing, is don't just be like, I'm just going to sit there and just see what happens. I think you really have to just make a decision. And if you look at the other teams in the league and you say, okay, I've got 4 teams that have just disheveled their roster. Even if I just sit here and sit tight, I'm going to be like the 5th or 6th pick. I might as well just shove and go. I really wouldn't advise doing that unless a scenario where you're getting like CMC, Kelsey, guys like that. That's different.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a little bit different. But if you're like, I'm going to shove and I'm going to get DeAndre Swift, I'm going to get like guys like that.
Yeah,
that's a little bit like, okay, you may not even get the buy. I feel pretty confident you're going to get the buy on that roster now.
Yeah. So yeah, exactly. So I already had the record, so it wasn't like I had to shift and like make up for a record or something like that. I guess my point is that I find a lot of people will become very rigid in what they're trying to do, whether it's builds or specific players, and it's important to like understand sometimes you're right, sometimes you're wrong, and adjust accordingly. Like you're saying,
and
like don't just sit on your hands.
Yeah, and I think some of the, like you asked a few minutes ago, kind of what are the things that you're looking for with your team and the league in terms of changing your mind on the direction you thought you were headed. And in a scenario like that, I'm unexpectedly 4-0. A lot of teams are trying to tank. I can probably get great, sell some picks and get a lot of value from win now pieces back. I'm also heavily considering the age of my team. Now, you said you're in a rebuild. You were going into the season kind of thinking rebuild 1 year punt, and that's going to that leads me to believe you have a lot of youth on the team. I would say be careful if you're overachieving with, Kyron Williams going off and like a couple other unsustainable old guys popping off, but you have no depth. Bye weeks are just now starting to hit. Injuries are starting to hit. Kind of take a look at that. Make sure that you're not selling out your future without having sustainable value on your bench through youth or, future picks or whatnot. So
I'm going to give my quick elevator speech on basically how I would optimal tank.
Yeah.
And basically what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to have an anchor quarterback and probably just one, unless I've got Kyler Murray. So I want an anchor quarterback. I want to have absolutely 0 points getting scored at running back.
Yeah.
I want to have either Kyle Pitts at tight end, or I don't want to have a tight end. I will admit, I do have a couple tank teams where I acquired Dalton Kincaid in rookie drafts, and I've been sliding him in, so I am taking a few points there. But ideally, I don't want any points at running back. I don't want any points at tight end. I've got at least a couple teams where I'm taking zeros weekly at tight end because I have like Brenton Strange or somebody sliding in. He's my only tight end on the roster. And then I want to basically build out my receiver room and then my picks. Those are my receiver room, young receivers. So I still have players that next year I'm ready to rock. I can make a couple trades. And then I'm ready to make it a 1 year rebuild.
I think that's a very important distinction you made there, Todd. I think a lot of people have this common misconception of if I'm tanking, I just get rid of everybody and start over. You can tank pretty effectively, like you're saying, just with gaps in certain positions. Running back is a great one. Again, if you don't have a core tight end, but you need your core pieces. Like this past rookie draft, I can't tell you how many teams I saw that just absolutely dismantled their team just to get Bijan, and their team sucks. They're terrible. They're 3-4 years away that they're eventually either they're selling Bijan, they're risking what they paid is not going to be the value in a couple of years, or just in general wasting his prime. So that's important. Even if you're looking for building blocks, but if you just dismantle everything else and you have this cool building block, you're going to be in a 2, 3, 4, 5 year rebuild.
Yeah, we'll see guys make trades where they're taking just total value loss just so they can improve their pick. I would just rather take the one less slot and take my lump there. Maybe I end up with Marvin Harrison Jr. instead of Caleb Williams, but I've not taken all those every single trade value loss. Those things add up, and that could be the difference between now I can just take that value and just trade up a spot and go get Caleb Williams. So I really do. I don't subscribe to just taking value loss just so that I can just say I got Caleb Williams at the 101.
Yeah, it's always it's so hard for me to kind of make generalized statements when it comes to a lot of the trades that you're willing to make on a rebuilding team. A lot of it's going to depend on if it's a 1 year punt. I have one team that Brian knows, one of our oldest leagues, a league called Wannabe Experts. it's literally one of the worst dynasty teams I've ever seen. I went all in a few years ago. I went all in with a bunch of older guys. I had a really good team for 1 year. Then it fell apart last year. And then this year I had a bunch of just old guys like Waller, Cousins, other people. And and one of the trades that I made was I didn't have my first or second round pick in 2024, knowing my team was going to suck. So one of the trades that I made to get that first and second back, knowing I was going to make sure it was the 101 and 201, was Cooper Kupp and Christian Watson for first and second. And people went nuts about that trade after, like, when it happened. They're like, oh my God, like, blah, blah, blah. And then once they realized it was mine and my own picks and I was tanking, they were still like, man, that's a crazy sticker price. But yeah, you don't want to get in that position where you have to do that. But otherwise, if I did not do that trade, then I'm looking at starting a rebuild in 25, 26. I'm just pushing it, kicking the can down the road.
Delaying the inevitable. Yep.
So you need to be honest with your team, and sometimes you need to tear it down. Now, literally, that's the only team that is in that position where it's that bad. Not like I know it's going to be a 2 or 3 year rebuild.
If
most of the rebuilds you probably want to accomplish in 1 year, you want to do a 1 year punt. And
typically, if you're proactive, you don't get to the point of where I have to tear everything down. I think that's the important thing to emphasize, that it's not, well, I'm going to just ride till the wheels fall off with this okay roster. If you have top of the top and you're trying to get like a three-peat or something like that, fine. Like I have a team like that Todd and I are in a league together where I'm kind of accepting that I'm riding it off into the sunset, and I'm trying to get a guy here or there that, you know, is maybe younger that I can add in, but it still win now. But that's how it goes sometimes.
Yeah, no, this league is a perfect example of that, where last year I wasn't really honest with myself about my team, and Kupp and Stafford, that stack for the first half of the year was really kind of carrying my team, and I did not have a lot of depth around them, and I was kind of like, well, I'm still competing because these guys are awesome. As soon as Kupp got hurt and Stafford went down the tank, my entire team sucked. So
just to tie a bow on this thought in general, I kind of use, first of all, you know, based on my age, Rounders was a big movie for my age group, right? So the poker movie, I use when you're trying to assess whether you're a contender or not. If you're not sure, you're not, right? So the quote is, if you can spot the sucker in your first half hour, then you are. If you can't spot the sucker in the first half hour, then you are the sucker. So that's kind of how I try, and I always have that quote in my head, just like sitting there thinking, okay, am I the best team? Am I the worst team? If not, then I need to do something and be proactive.
Yep, exactly. Yeah, no, I agree. And the only other thing I would say when doing contending and rebuilding, I don't know if you guys want to end this with some quick rebuild advice, but a lot of people like to throw away thirds. Like Brian, you yourself say, I do not care about a third. It will not change my perception of an offer. Contenders are happy to throw them away. I don't value thirds a lot. On a rebuild, I do love stacking thirds, 4, 5, 6 of them in one round. They're generally, I've had success. You can hit 1 or 2 of them that'll turn into like an early second or more value. So that is one strategy. If you're running low on pieces to move, just try and stack up some thirds. It's a pretty easy thing to accomplish. But
really quick,
you guys got?
Yeah, really quick. We're about to go into trades, and this is actually, this has a contender type discussion to it. But quickly, so I had pondered making a trade of moving I'm a contender, moving my Pitts to acquire Hawkinson. I've got a really good team, but I'm starting Pitts at tight end, and like every week I'm just getting basically nothing from him. So for the moment, let's ignore like Pitts versus Hawkinson value. But I checked the difference because I was thinking, okay, maybe I could trade Pitts for Hawkinson and it'll really improve my roster, really improve my team. Mm-hmm. So I checked the difference each week, 1 through 4, from Pitts to Hawkinson, and how it would impact my all play for my win-loss total. So basically 44 outcomes. With each week, you have 11 outcomes. Through 4 weeks, going from Pitts to Hawkinson, 1 week they were tied. 1 week it was like a difference of 7 or 8. 1 week it was like 20. through 4 weeks, I would have gained one additional all-play win in total. So out of 44 outcomes, going from Pitts to Hawkinson, Pitts, who is unusable essentially through the first 4 weeks, Hawkinson, who's a pretty good tight end, one difference in outcome. So I think it's just a reminder that taking maybe not a loss in value, but losing out maybe on future for a very small contender move, maybe not move the needle as much as you think. But those like CMC, Kelsey, Andrews, those maybe moves more so do. But it's just kind of a reminder that just the feeling of those projected points, if you will, don't always move the needle on wins as much as we always want to think. So I don't have any value discussion there with it, but I think it's just kind of a good reminder as you're building out your contender rosters.
Yeah, no, definitely. So with that, I'd say let's move on to our trade segments. We have a lot of fun trades to talk about this week, especially compared to the last couple. Brian, I'll let you get into one in a minute. I do need to start off with the trade that Todd and I made about a half hour ago. I was out there walking my dog as I do before every show, kind of gathering my thoughts. And I was thinking, I was kind of reading your notes, Brian. I was like, all right, what am I selling Achane for right now? What am I trying to get for him? Like, okay, well, I'm trying to get an elite wide receiver, an elite young wide receiver. That's what I'm trying to do. And I know I probably need to add on to him. So I was taking a look at one of the leagues that all three of us are in together. I noticed that Todd had Amon-Ra St. Brown, and that caught my eye. I think him and Olave are probably right now for me Dynasty wide receiver 3 and 4. I view them interchangeably. I sent out an offer to the Olave owner, the Garrett Wilson owner, and then Todd. I knew I had to come heavy with the offer, and I think you guys know me. I generally am going to send out close to my best offer, not as like an inflexible thing. I just don't like getting low ball offers myself, so I try not to avoid them. I try and send a respectful offer, especially when it's a player like Amon-Ra St. Brown that everybody loves. So, Todd, I sent you Devon Achane, Marvin Mims, Luke Musgrave, and 225 seconds for Amon-Ra, and you did accept that without a counter, which I thought was nice of you to not get greedy. So before we get to Todd, Brian, what do you think of that trade?
Yeah, so I think it's interesting. I think you gave probably the right amount of Achane value for what it is right now. I didn't take a closer look at your guys' rosters, but
I have a strong win now.
Huh?
I have a very strong win now roster. I'm
Okay,
4-0. I have the most points scored by about 200.
I'm probably taking Armon, but I mean, I see both sides of it for sure. I'm still. It was the right price to pay. I get why Todd accepted it, and maybe if I'm in his spot, I accept it too.
So, Todd, what was going through your mind there?
So I want to take a step back. You made a comment about making really good, strong offers, and Matt gets definitely more trades done than anybody in any league that I'm in. I also think that if I looked at just my leagues in a whole, I probably get as many trades done as anybody, but not as many as Matt gets done. And it's because he makes really good offers. And I think part of the reason, not just making really good offers, but I would guess that you get respectful offers in return because they know this guy makes good offers. I'm not going to be a jerk and like send him something ridiculous. So
you're going to get engagement.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Because they know that you send good offers. So I think that's like, there's like a respect factor there. I know when I've gotten offers from you before that maybe I just don't want to do, but I know it's fair. I'm not going to counter with something ridiculous because I want to be respectful. Now that's not to say that I'm not going to like compete hard, but I want to keep a good trade partner together with you because I know that you make fair offers. I want to make fair offers in return. So that's kind of just a side note. The trade though.
Appreciate it.
I don't want to like unravel our contender discussion, but this team, just to kind of give a little bit of context, and let's recap the trade one more time because there's a lot of moving parts there. So Matt, do you have it in front of you?
HN.
I memorized it. So I got Amon-Ra St.
seconds.
Brown. I gave you HN. I gave you Marvin Mims, Luke Musgrave, and 225 seconds. So
Okay.
HN, Mims, Musgrave, 225 seconds.
There we go. So my roster is in a weird spot. I am a contender in theory. I traded away Bryce Young. This is before the season. Bryce Young, JMO, and my 24 first to acquire Herbert. I still feel great about that trade. I would do it again.
Yeah.
But it put me into a spot where I have to at least try to contend. And my roster is very young. I've got JSN, QJ, Pitts, T. Higgins, who's not been doing anything. I've got some running backs that kind of help me contend. So I have like a lot of depth on this roster. But you have a juggernaut team. I'm probably a team that I just want to kind of get into the playoffs, and I'm in that middle tier. But I'm in the middle tier because I acquired Herbert. Otherwise, I probably would have tried to find a way to rebuild. So that just kind of gives you a context of like your team's a juggernaut, my team's a very middle of the road, and it's because of that trade. So I acquire Achane in this deal. Marvin Mims, who I really like. I think that he was probably a needle mover for me.
Yeah.
He's a guy that I probably value closer to, like, off the top of my head, low 30s of wide receiver rankings. His peripherals are just insane. I don't know. Like, if you scroll through Twitter, people will post charts of rookie receivers, and they remove Marvin Mims because he messes up the chart.
Yeah. So you think his yards per run being twice as high as Tyreek Hill's is good?
Yeah, I mean that's a positive. So he was a major key for me. I think if it was like some other random wide receiver, like
if it was Michael Wilson, you're not pulling the trigger.
Oh, exactly. So he was a needle mover for me. The other thing is that Achane, his market value, I think that there's probably people that would say he's running back 3, he's running back 4 or 5, and he's not a guy maybe that I want to hold on to for long, unless maybe I still have him and he does it again on Sunday. He's probably a guy that I'm looking to then flip and kind of. You alluded to it in the chat. You said I had some coins to basically spend, and so I did. He's a guy that I would take this and try to avalanche it and move him again. So if I hold, I'm risking the chance that Achane backs up a little bit. He moves into that wider running back 10 range, and okay, maybe that wasn't the greatest trade. But my thought process is my team's in a weird spot. Let's just add some value. Maybe I can package some other stuff together later and maybe roll kind of avalanche, if you will, that trade. So that was kind of where I was at. And to your point, I didn't counter. I thought you made a good offer. I'm either going to accept this or I'm going to decline it. I'm not going to nickel and dime and try to get like, what am I going to ask for? A third or like, you had Musgrave in the deal. I'm not a big Musgrave guy. I'd rather get, like, I think Musgrave is worth maybe a second. I'd rather get another guy that's maybe worth a second, but I'm not going to nickel and dime in a trade like that. That's just not really my style. If somebody makes a really, really good offer that I already deem acceptable.
So we know Matt is a Packers fan and he values
that freaked me out
probably
a little bit.
higher than you. That's why it's like, it's interesting.
That freaked me out.
So here might be the context, right? So Matt and I this past week in a different league, he acquired Musgrave from me.
Oh, that's a good seed. Yep.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm in this current situation, I'm in a rebuild. I believe Matt, you're win now.
I don't know what I am, but yeah.
So that's good that we're giving advice on this stuff. Then, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so I gave Musgrave and Algier. And you gave me of super ultra win now old teams 26-1. Right. Yep. So that's got to elicit some response from Todd. I'm not sure if he knows about this one or not. I
do remember seeing this in the chat now.
Yeah. So 26 first on a ultra win now team right now. I gave up the 26 first for Luke Musgrave and Tyler Algier. And kind of what I was going for there when I said I don't really know what I'm doing. It's a team that we were talking about. We were talking about last segment that you're going into a season with a 1-year punt or a rebuild in mind. And shout out my cousin Pat. Thursday nights we get on a video call usually, and so we ended up making 2 giant trades. I don't even really want to go into those trades because they're so complicated. But essentially, I traded I had a lot of surplus picks. I kept all my original picks and a couple extras, and I got Burrow and T. Higgins and Ayuk and a couple other pieces back. And I decided, and I started 2-1 hilariously with like just no QB2, etc. So anyway, I was kind of going for win now, but definitely not selling out. My picks were not for sale. I still think my team could crater, especially because it's built around Joe Burrow right now that's struggling. But Musgrave is a guy that I love. I'm willing to pay not quite a late first for him, but Tyler Algier is to me maybe the number 1 handcuff in the NFL. I do think he's worth like a late second, right? So
yeah, that makes sense. So Todd, what are you thinking from the outside looking in, hearing some of the context that Matt and I both gave? Where do you stand with this one?
So I mean,
he's taking
anytime I can get that 26-1 from somebody who will likely fizzle out. Now, do they have like Adams and Tyreek, guys like that? Because by 2025, they're going to I think they're going to still be around, and that's probably going to be late. Either way, I'm taking a late 26.
This guy's team is in my opinion, the easy favorite on paper for this year.
Yeah. So I mean, I'm still taking a 26-1 but if it's a pick that could ultimately miss the playoffs, things could get dicey in the future. But I'd actually liked Luke Musgrave coming into the year and I just couldn't get him. It seemed like I just couldn't find a way to acquire him. I just kept missing. I had one though, and I traded him for his teammate Romeo Dobbs. I think after week 1.
Oh, so interesting.
I still kind of like that trade, but based on Matt's value of Musgrave, but Dobbs has kind of been good. Where would you be at on that deal as we stand today?
I'd rather have Musgrave than Dobbs, but I would value them similarly. But I do think Musgrave has potential to be a special tight end that is, in the top 5 every year. His athleticism is up there with the best tight ends in the game. He's getting day 1 every down usage, just a whole lot to like from Luke Musgrave. The reason I tossed him into that Amon-Ra trade, which I might not have even needed to do, was that I have 44% Luke Musgrave, or maybe now I'm down to 35%, whatever. I have a ton of them. I have 7 shares still. I'm still buying him anywhere I can at his current value. Not to get into my Homer segment of the week and stuff, but
no, it's okay. Keep going. We can talk Romeo Dobbs too. Go ahead and
do it. But I think
60 seconds on the clock.
Musgrave is a major. Musgrave's a major. What's that? Musgrave's a major buy to me. Definitely you should not be concerned that the Packer fan was kind of pawning him off to you in that deal. I actually just thought I was looking at it from your end and I'm like, man, I don't think he's going to want to trade him on. So let me throw in another young high value player.
I only have Pitts on that roster, really. I
did
have
see
some other bum tight end.
Mm-hmm.
I only have Pitts. And I had already been looking all right, I got to find another tight end. Like I said, I'm contending in theory on this team. So yeah, adding Musgrave was kind of a nice bonus. At least maybe now I have another dart throw at tight end for the rest of the year. So yeah.
So Brian, what other kind of trades have you been cooking up this week? I see a few.
So I think I alluded to this big chain reaction of trades. So I made 4 trades in this one league, and I just want to break them down as a whole. It's going to be a lot of moving parts. So you guys, if I need to repeat them, please tell me that, and we'll go through it. I think this is a great way to kind of see a shift in team build, right? So the first trade I made, I gave Dalton Kincaid and a mid to late 24-1, let's say. Got Kelsey plus Stafford. So that right away to me, I was comfortable with my surplus of picks. It bringing in Kelsey and Stafford solidified QB room as a QB3. I have CJ Stroud as my QB2, Josh Allen QB1.
Oh, that's awesome.
And Kelsey in a tight end premium boosted to my current at the moment Laporta. So how do you guys, where are you guys at with that first trade so we can kind of break it down, Todd?
how are you valuing Kincaid in that trade? Like, what's he worth? So you gave away, just to recap the trade again, you gave away Kincaid and a mid to late 24-1. You acquired Kelsey and Stafford. In your mind, what was Kincaid's value within that trade?
Late
or
one.
what is his okay? Yeah, what is his value in general?
I was a little bit lower than consensus on Kincaid. A couple of people swayed me a little bit to maybe overinvest a little bit. So I was kind of looking to move him anyways. It doesn't help that he hasn't done great to start.
Yeah.
I'm not saying he's, mayor or anything, but I was viewing it as definitely an overpay, like a little bit, but I also think Kelsey is that big of a game changer that, like we talked about CMC before, like sometimes you just pay for those guys to really swing. And then my surplus of picks and keeping my own picks gives me flexibility. So if I wanted to trade off Kelsey, if this was the only trade I made, I could also sell Kelsey in, a few weeks and feel pretty comfortable that I could get a decent return.
So we're 4 weeks into Michael Mayer's career and he's already the butt of the joke, huh?
He was from the jump.
Poor guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is MEHER for me. His spelling of his last name.
So
Matt,
Kincaid,
real quick, yes,
really quick, Kincaid. My value on him would be I would sell for any sort of like late one. I wouldn't buy for a late one, but I'd still buy for a couple twos.
Yeah, that's fair.
Yeah, I'd agree with that value. Stafford, I think. It's funny. I was going to say a couple twos for Stafford, but he doesn't have. I don't think he has the same value as Kincaid. But I do. I don't think you can get Stafford for a two on most teams. Like I have a couple Staffords. I'm not selling them for a single two with the way he's playing this year.
So Stafford was, for me, it was kind of like we talked about, like with Michael Wilson. He was this kind of a tack on that I could get in for value that I didn't necessarily want to outright pay, in my opinion, two ones. So that was like the bridge.
Yeah, help me understand this team you traded with.
Yeah.
Help me understand this team you traded with. So they had Kelsey and Stafford on this team that is now looking to rebuild.
I assume so. That's
okay.
Not up.
That's just a very rare.
Yeah,
that's just a very rare thing.
It's going
week 4. We're trading. We still have Stafford and we still have Kelsey. But like if you're in a league and you see Kelsey on a team that's rebuilding, that should be rebuilding. Yeah, I mean they should have a target on their back. They may not even be paying attention, and you may be able to slide in, make them an offer, and they're like, "Screw it, I don't feel like doing any work. I'm just going to accept this so that I can go ahead and start the rebuild and not have to do anything."
So I think we're on board.
I like the trade for you. I mean, it's.
I definitely like the Kelsey Stafford side of that trade. Let me bring up the second trade that you have highlighted that you did, and let me see if I have this right. Same league, you gave Quentin Johnston and a late 24-1, late 24-2 for AJB.
So they were my rookie picks, 24-1 and 24-2.
Yeah.
Maybe at this point, people aren't viewing me as a strong contender. I knew once I was making this deal, I was going to continue to make a couple more.
Yeah.
And that's kind of like timing wise. Like if they view me as a middling team, or they just looked at the max points for, I'm in the middle of the pack.
Yeah.
So that's
give us
something
a sense
that you
also.
Kind of,
when did this trade happen? Was this after week 4 or prior to week 4? So going into week 4, Mike Williams was injured, and there was that question of will QJ explode, and will he get to play over Josh Palmer? It didn't happen. So do you remember when this trade happened, whether it was before or after week 4?
The first trade was with Kelsey was right after Monday. And AJ and this QJ one that Matt mentioned, QJ late 1, late 2 for AJ Brown was the next day.
Okay, so Tuesday. So
yeah,
AJ Brown seems to still be gettable based on that trade, but maybe it's that QJ is still sellable. I don't know what it is. Really quick, AJ Brown. He was my buy like 2 weeks ago before he went off. I think I would assume that in most cases the buy window is closed now.
I wouldn't say it's closed. I mean, if you're offering QJ in a 1 and 2, like if I'm Brian, I'm comfortable offering that, especially if Brian knows what he's doing. He can make sure that Those picks have a really good chance to be late. But even with AJ Brown going off last week, I got to think, and with QJ starting to concern people, I got to think QJ at 1 and a 2 is going to get someone's attention at least.
Okay, maybe I'm losing. Maybe I don't have as much excitement about QJ or maybe I don't see the community having as much excitement about QJ.
It's definitely lower. But it was a matter of, again, you got to just find
the right guy,
the right guy, the right team build, the right team. And just I don't want us to spend too much time on these couple of trades. I feel kind of selfish at the moment. I just want to I want to really quickly just say the other 2 trades. So I gave Laporta and got Andrews.
Yep.
Laporta got Andrews. So we've talked about this before. Tight ends are kind of interchangeable. I have a lot of Laporta. I was happy to, once my build is the way it was, to go from Laporta to Andrews. This happened I believe it was Friday. It was after the Thursday game.
So the true bully tight end strategy with Kelsey and Andrews.
Yeah. I love it. I have one team like that. It's so awesome. But yeah, no, I like that. There has been a lot of chatter about Laporta versus Andrews and Laporta Dynasty tight end 1. I tweeted last week after the Lions destroyed my team that I'm okay with that conversation. I'm okay with that opinion. It's just not one that I have personally. Andrews is my tight end 1 in Dynasty until further notice.
I'm with you. I'm with you. That's where it's at. And I think, we're all in agreement there. And this last trade is the one I already kind of referenced. I gave 2 25-1. So my own, and then what I think is kind of a middling team, 25-2, my own 25-2, and got CMC, Dobbs, and Josh Kelly. So again, just, I don't love Dobbs or Kelly, but it was just kind of one of those things. I was like, I just need something to like give me a little extra, maybe value, either win now or I could flip something. So.
Yeah, no, I love that. Like I said, I mean, there's almost no, I mean, this is an exaggeration, but there's almost no price that's reasonable that I won't pay to get CMC on my contending team.
Just to reiterate that trade, it was you said 2 25-1s, 25-2, and you got CMC, Dobbs, and Kelly. What's your QB situation on that team? Like, is Dobbs like QB4? What are you at?
Well, he's QB3, right?
QB4, yeah. So,
okay. So that's a little insurance policy to have, yeah.
Yeah, so it was just a flyer and maybe some value accumulation that I can either sell Stafford off or Dobbs. I mean, if I get anything out of that, great. If not, no biggie.
So this team is full throttle, all contender now. This is the team that you said was 4-0 and kind of was thinking about rebuild, and now it's a full.
And now it's got everyone else scared.
the last thing, and I'll just run down. This is my starting roster. I'm not going to go any beyond that, just to give context. So it's Josh Allen, Christian McCaffrey, Kamara, AJ Brown, Chris Olave, Ayuk, Kelsey, Andrews, Mostert, Mixon, Miles Sanders, CJ Stroud. So it's a start 12.
People forget in start 12 how deep you really have to be good in that format.
Yeah, no doubt.
So I'm going to hop into a trade that I talked about earlier. We don't have to go into a lot of detail on it, but I really want to hear from Matt. He mentioned Pollard earlier. I want to hear from him on kind of what his stance is on Pollard. But this was a 3-way deal, kind of a little bit clunky. I won't get into other pieces. I'll just talk about my aspect. I moved Burks, Rashad White, Roshan Johnson, and a third to acquire Tony Pollard. So that was Burks, Rashad White, Roshan Johnson, a third for Pollard. My team was really deep. I needed just a little bit of help in the starting lineup. Barkley's been hurt. So Gibbs, I have Gibbs on that team. Gibbs has not quite been what I was hoping for. So I want to kind of like let him kind of mature a bit and then slide Pollard in. But Matt, you were talking about Pollard earlier. Curious on what your thoughts on the trade, and then what maybe you would be trying to purchase Pollard for.
Yeah, I mean, I like the Pollard side there. Burks, Rashad White, Roshan Johnson. I really don't care that much about those guys. Added together, it does look like a healthy price to pay for Pollard. Like Rashad White's getting touches. People still like Burks. People like Roshan, etc. But I'll take the Pollard side there. Generally, it's hard to say. I mean, I already have Pollard on like 3 of my best teams. I'd be trying to trade Brian Robinson in a second for him, or Brian Robinson in 2 seconds. I would be trying to pay Rachaad White, and like Rachaad White and Burks, I would think would maybe get Pollard, but probably not because it's not.
That was what I offered. So just to give you a little more context, I offered Rachaad White and Burks for Pollard. The person wanted a 24-1. I didn't have one. Okay. So he wanted a 24-1 and Rachaad White. So I used Burks and plus to go get that 24-1. It was actually mine. The guy was viewing it as like 111, 112. So,
okay, gotcha.
So we sent him the 24-1. I sent the other guy Burke. So that's how it became a 3-way. Just to
that's probably if I had rostered your team and I went into that negotiation, it would have ended the exact same way. I'm looking at Pollard. I want to buy him. Who do I have on my team? I got Rachaad White and Treylon Burks. All right, let me try and use that to go get him. Okay, this is what it turns into. So yeah, I like that. I'm trying to generally do that. I'm looking at moving 2 young guys who have some value that I think are probably overpriced right now, and try to go get Pollard there. So yeah, no, that's Pollard I think is a strong buy. That we do have a lot more trades that we could have talked about, but we are going to try and keep this episode within a reasonable time span. So we will kind of move on to our closing time segment. We'll kind of review some of last week's buy and sells. Todd, you had Tutu as a sell at a mid 2. You'd been talking about this like the last week or two that you're trying to move some Tutu. You were able to get that done, right?
Yeah, I had a lot of Tutu Atwell from just off waiver wire. I didn't draft him anywhere in rookie drafts, but I got a bunch off waiver wire. I ended up selling him. Well, actually, one Matt to you, Cortland Sutton and Tutu. I think you were trying to build out some depth on a team. You have a really good team. It was Sutton and Tutu. For DJ Moore, essentially, there were some other pieces in there.
No, you got Pop Douglas, man. Don't forget about him.
I got Pop Douglas.
Dude, people like Pop, man. So yeah, you got DJM and Pop for Tutu and Sutton. I think that was a pretty solid trade for you. But
yeah, and then I ended up turning DJ Moore into Marvin Mims in a second right after that. And then
I was so mad about it.
Then I traded a Tutu and a 25 third for Nick Chubb on a tanker. So I thought I'm really looking to go and make moves like that. Really getting Tutu off my roster, but yeah, I was able to make a few.
Yeah, Todd, I'd say take that right into your this week closing time buy or sell. As Matt and I were both unsuccessful because we don't own much of what we said to trade.
Yeah.
So Ramondre Stevenson and Justin Fields. So Todd, why don't you that's a great segue into your sell or buy of the week.
Yeah, so my buy of the week is Nick Chubb or Mike Williams. So I'm trying to get those guys on all my tank teams. I'm trying to move. I'd maybe move a couple thirds. Really, I'd like to try like a player and a third, like Tutu. I'm just trying to get any Rashid Shaheed and maybe like a couple of thirds, something like that, where maybe the guy just needs like a flex start. Now that we're in bye weeks, I think there's a chance where they might need a start, and they'd be, you know what, I'll move Chubb, grab a couple picks or something, and I'll move Chubb or Mike Williams. So those are my buys of the week. If you have a tank team, there's no reason why you shouldn't be going out and trying to add those guys.
What are you, Brian?
My buy is, we've already talked about him at great length, but I just, again, context wise, Michael Wilson, again, we're not going to get a straight up probably buy 1-to-1, like for a pick or a player, but I'm really targeting Jordan Addison, who's kind of had an off game. There's been some, Matt Harmon stuff or whatever that people are kind of a little against him in certain directions. So I'm looking for someone in that range again, like Flowers, and looking to get Addison plus Wilson. Matt?
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. I'll say for buy or sell, I will go with a sell this week, and it's a player I absolutely love that I sold to Todd tonight. Devon Achane, I would say, is a sell right now, and only in the terms of if I have him, I'm doing what I did with Todd today. I'm going big game hunting. I'm trying to get a top 10 dynasty wide receiver. I'm trying to get Amon, Olave, Garrett Wilson, and I'm trying to do what I can to piece together with Achane that's less than the one on top of him to get one of those guys. So that's it for me. Todd, you want to take us out?
All right. Yeah, so we're buying Nick Chubb, we're buying Mike Williams, Michael Wilson, and then we're selling Devon Achane. So I just acquired one, so I'll be looking to do it. So we appreciate y'all joining the Dynasty Market Watch tonight with us. If you can, give us a retweet or a like on our posts for the podcast, and then slide in our DMs. Give us some feedback. We'd love to hear what you think, what you want to hear, what your thoughts are. But for Brian, for Matt, I'm Todd. Thanks for joining.
Thanks, guys. Bye.
Bye.